I have the Warriors in my next spot here, right behind LA as my 7 seed at 46-36.
I'm a little higher on the Dubs, Logan. I've got them winning 49 games. I have got them as my 6th seed. So we flip the Lakers and Warriors in our respective standings. Let's start with this Jonathan Kuminga news because after a summer of no fun, no merriment, no whimsy for the Warriors, no signings, everything was held up by this Kuminga drama. There is finally a resolution. It is a 2-year, $48.5 million deal, but it's really a 1-and-1. There's a team option after this year, at which point the Warriors will be allowed to reevaluate their options. So what do you make of this ending for now to the Kuminga situation?
I find it pretty ironic, the fact that this is the situation the Warriors find themselves in. The fact that they blew so many of these high draft picks that they're scrambling to hold on to him. I'm glad they re-signed him. That's the only reason they bring him back is because they just didn't want to blow a top 10 pick and just let him leave for nothing because that's just wasting an asset away. Kuminga's a non-factor for me, a non-starter. I don't know. People who are still holding on to Kuminga stock, I think should sell it. Kuminga's a trade asset. Like, that's all he is to me with the Warriors. Are they going to trade him? When does he get traded? Who does he get traded for? Kuminga has no bearing on the outcome of wins and losses, of playoff outcomes, of individual games. The guy's not a rotation factor or like a guy who makes a meaningful difference to me if he is in this rotation. So all of the things around Kuminga basically to me are who does he get traded for midseason and when does he get dealt? Because he doesn't factor in to this team's long-term outlook, in my opinion.
It seems pretty clear to me that both parties here are looking to pursue a trade once that is eligible to happen in January. Because, like you said, Kuminga's fit here is bad. I mean, this guy was deservedly getting DNPs when this team was at full health. And he has some talent as a self-creator, as a scorer, and you see it in stretches, right? I mean, it was impressive for him individually in the playoff series against the Timberwolves when Steph was hurt. But you have to understand that within the context of this roster, he is simply bad at the things that are needed of a player in his role. He has bad feel. He has bad basketball IQ. He is a low effort, very inconsistent defender. He is a bad passer. He is a pretty bad jump shooter. So all of these complementary traits that are needed of a guy who is going to fit well playing alongside Steph Curry and now Jimmy Butler as well, Kuminga just doesn't do those things. And particularly with Jimmy, I mean, it's beyond clunky. Like, the fit with the two of them, with all of Kuminga's limitations, is just a disaster. When Jimmy Butler was on the floor without Kuminga for the Warriors this year, they had a plus 11 net rating. When Jimmy Butler was on the floor with Kuminga, they had a -6 net rating. So you can't play him alongside your second best player. He does not play well whatsoever off of your best player. And he's shown absolutely no willingness to try to embrace a role, to try to do the little things. He thinks he's a star. He wants his big money. He wants his high usage somewhere else. Fine. Fine, man. Like, realistically, Kuminga is not going to get what he thinks he's going to get anywhere. And I think that this offseason has made that very, very clear with how painful and drawn out this negotiation was. Clearly, there was no interest for him on the open market, and so he just kind of, at the end of the day, comes back for a short-term deal. And this is the option that gives him some money in his pocket, and it gives the Warriors one last chance to, in theory, move off him quickly now for some value. Because, like you said, they don't want to just lose the asset for nothing. But I don't think anybody really wants Jonathan Kuminga. And their ceiling is going to hinge on their ability to turn basically his money into a decent role player or two. And I just don't know if that's going to happen. Like, when you look at all of the major limitations that Kuminga has, and you look at the overall lack of progress through 4 years, and the fact that he is still struggling so much at all these things, because even though it's like, oh yeah, he's a really good athlete and he can score the basketball, he's a great athlete. When you can't make the basic reads, when you can't knock down the jump shots needed to keep defenses honest as a counter. It's like, who's going to be like, oh yeah, not only do I want to be paying that guy $24 million right now, I want to invest a bigger contract in him, a long-term contract going forward, and make him the building block of my future. Like, I don't see another team doing that, and that's why I'm not optimistic about the Warriors flipping Kuminga into some really good role players, especially because if they do flip him to somebody, it's going to be a shitty team that can absorb his contract and like is in total rebuild mode. And those teams tend to not be rich with like good role players ready to contribute now for a team that's trying to win playoff series. So for now, the guy's just eating up $23 million this year. His vibes are terrible. His fit is terrible. And I just wish he was gone. I understand why the Warriors don't want to let him walk. I think the return for him probably will be underwhelming when they do trade him. I really hope I'm wrong about that, but I just wish this thing was over with as a fan. And best case scenario to me, Kuminga, while he's on the team, can play 15 minutes a game and he can bring some scoring juice off the bench. Worst case scenario to me is probably they try to force him into a bigger role to drive his value up. That would be nightmarish for me, just considering how catastrophic his fit really is with the starting lineup. And I don't think they'll do that. But the other thing that's frustrating about this whole Kuminga situation is, I mean, my outlook was when he was a draft pick, when he was just an idea in terms of being in the NBA's balls, so to speak, a twinkle in the NBA's eyes, I wanted him to be traded for Pascal Siakam, for a win now star. And now here we are, 4 years later. We're now having to give him a second contract, even though it's a short-term deal. And still, like, nobody knows who Jonathan Kuminga is. And nobody is chomping at the bit to make him a key part of their team's future. And I don't think his value is ever going to be higher than it was after December of last year. I mean, that was the month where he really had the runway to show off what he could do. And he scored 20 points per game. And even though it was never going to work that way within the context of, like, the Warriors at full strength, right? Like, that's when he at least put enough on tape for some rebuilding team somewhere to say, okay, yeah, that's the guy that we want. His stock is never going to be higher than that, and they didn't trade him then, and we'll see what they get back for him now. But dude, he's my least favorite Warrior ever, Logan. I mean, I'm so done with Jonathan Kuminga.
Who else is on that list?
Well, the first guy I think of is Harrison Barnes because he cost the team an NBA title with one of the worst shooting performances ever. But you know what, man? There were some good times with HB. There were some smiles. There were some laughs. There were some highlights. He was the Black Falcon. And ultimately, he's a good guy. He never did anything toxic to fuck up the team. Jonathan Kuminga is causing all this drama and all these complications, and he's bad for what the Warriors want him to do. He's flat out bad, and he's not good overall. And he's got this massive ego about it. So yeah, he takes the cake, man. And I actually don't think it's that close. And what's even worse is you never had people telling you, oh, Harrison Barnes is actually the future of this team, like people have been doing with Kuminga for years, just this blindness to all his major limitations. What a frustrating saga it has been for years. But other than that, Logan, what's your outlook for the Warriors this year?
Real quick, I've been through every team, man. I can't come up with a reasonable trade for both sides.
It's like, dude, if the Nets aren't going to take a flyer on you when they've got all the cap space in the
exactly.
world, you know,
I mean,
who's going to do it?
My only two results, and I don't think either of these teams would agree to this because I don't think it makes sense for them. Washington, to make the money work, you could do Corey Kispert and Keyshawn George. I would rather have those guys than Jonathan Kuminga. Charlotte, Kuminga for Colin Sexton straight up because Sexton's an expiring deal. But
I mean, I would love that.
Yeah, I mean, I think both of those trades would be better for the Warriors than just having Kuminga. And, I mean, I think Kuminga would be able to at least play on both of those teams. But, yeah, the Warriors have put themselves in this situation, man, and I don't. Like you said, dude, it's like when Shedeur fell to the 5th round in the NFL draft. I look at it very...
My goat, bruh. My mime goat. You don't know how long I've been waiting to see mime representation in pro sports.
Dude, that was the most preposterous interview I've ever watched in my life.
That was the weirdest shit I've ever seen, bro. And Logan, you and I have been a part of some weird shit, and a lot of these people watching right now have seen it. Have we ever done anything that weird? Probably yes. but we're not pro athletes, man. You know, we're clowns. He was doing a clown routine. That was so fucking odd. How do you look at that guy after this and be like, yeah, that's my quarterback, that's my leader? Bro, just say you're happy for the guy or something. Say you're going to keep working and wait for your opportunity to come. What the fuck? What an odd fella.
That was so funny, man. For real, though, dude. Shedeur is like a child.
And people are going to like defend that and be like, oh, first of all, actually, this is a highly intellectual reference to the 1920 classic French mime film. And Shedeur is being wronged by everybody around him. And Dylan Gabriel is actually a spawn of the devil. And you can see this coded 666 messaging in his latest statement. And it's like, well, man, I don't know. I think Shedeur's kind of setting himself up in a lot of these spots.
Agreed. But yeah, I mean, I look at both of them the same way, man. Shedeur fell to the 5th round. 32 teams passed on you 4 times. That should tell you about your stock. Kuminga, you sat around in free agency, and the Warriors dangled you on their fishing rod for the entire offseason, and nobody bit. So yeah. I think it tells you everything you need to know about him. But the reason I have them below is the Lakers specifically. I'm just worried about if the old guys can sustain their level of play. I mean, I think that is the story and the concern about the Golden State Warriors. Like, this is the retirement home, effectively. I love the Warriors' talent. I think all of these guys can still produce at their age, but it's pretty crazy. Steph is going to be 38 years old by the playoffs. Jimmy is 36. Dre is going to be 36 come playoffs. I think Horford is 39 right now. And, all these guys are really good, and the Warriors were great with Jimmy last year. They went 23-7 down the stretch with Jimmy. They were 25-27 without him. You look at what Steph did after Jimmy came into the team. His true shooting percentage jumped by 6%. He improved by 4 points per game and 1 assist per game. And so, I guess I don't really have any concerns about one of these guys taking a major step back. It's more of like a cumulative old guy tax where everybody takes like a 5% step back that I'm worried about, right? Like, I'm not anticipating any of these guys falling off a cliff, but you see the level Steph was at pre-Jimmy, and you're a little bit worried because of the strain on him and the offensive supporting cast. You looked at Jimmy in the playoffs when he's without Steph, and Jimmy just in totality last season. Jimmy attempted 12.3 field goals per 36 minutes. It was the lowest total of his career since becoming an all-star. I just worry about the old guys being stressed a little bit too much in their roles, and there's not a margin for them to fall off because the depth isn't great beyond them. They don't have a ton of good wings. They don't have a ton of solid depth in the front court overall, and they're lacking a certain amount of scoring punch from beyond anybody in their starting lineup. Like, there's just not a ton of depth and versatility here with this team, and I just think there's a lot of more talented teams straight up, man, and I just don't think there's the margins there for the old guys to get any worse. Like I said, I don't expect any of these guys to fall off a cliff or magically, Monstar style, like lose their basketball powers. But I wonder if a little bit of regression from all of the old guys leads to major regression from the team as a whole. And I really don't like the depth, man. I think that's the biggest thing. There's just not a ton of versatility in guys I liked in two-way ability here. So, again, I think Steph, Jimmy, and Dre and Horford, I think they'll carry them a decent amount. But I just wonder if it's going to be enough. And there's a lot of other teams, Carson, that I look at, and they've either got better depth or better versatility, or they've got young, athletic legs that I like more than the Warriors. So, yeah, just a little bit more worried, man. A lot of this, to me, not to beat a dead horse, I think it is going to hinge on the Kuminga deal, and if they can get anything done and add more players to their rotation.
Counterpoint. Steph played his best down the stretch of the season. Draymond defensively played out of his mind down the stretch of the season. Jimmy was so damn good down the stretch of the regular season, and then he got hurt in the playoffs, and he wasn't able to elevate in terms of his playoff scoring volume like they would have needed. And maybe he still can't do that, but he was delivering absolutely top 25 value down the stretch of the regular season. So I understand what you're saying, maybe with an old guy tax, but those guys most recently were all playing awesome, and this team won 48 games last year. That is not having Jimmy Butler for most of the year. They were 22-5 when Steph, Jimmy, and Dre all played together. And I think this roster now is better than last year. Like, you can talk about the depth, and obviously it is lacking compared to some of the other teams who we're talking about around the NBA, right? Like the Clippers, for example, absolutely have better depth than the Warriors. But I actually really like a couple of the additions that the Warriors have now been able to make because the Kuminga deal has resolved itself. These guys who so politely waited around all offseason just because they wanted to be dubs. Yes, these are moves on the margins, but that's really what was on the table for this team. And I really like a couple of these guys in terms of their ability to complement the big three. Al Horford, Logan, is going to be the best center that this team has had in so long. I understand that the guy is knocking on the door of 40 years old. And listen, if they could have had Al Horford 5 years ago, I mean, it would have actually been perfect. But he's still a legitimately good player who fits so well here. He is a high IQ passer. He is a high feel player that allows him to thrive in a motion offense. That means that he will play well off of a guy like Steph within this system. He's also a damn good shooting big that provides key spacing alongside Jimmy and Dre, where maybe that's a little bit of a concern. Overall, I mean, you just need consistent shooting in this lineup because they were lacking consistent everything offensively around Steph Curry last year. I've always wanted the Warriors to have a stretch big, and now Horford is that guy. I think the
Quinn
two-man
Post
game
wasn't doing it for you, man.
See, this is what I'm saying, bro. You're going from being like, shit, we have to play Quentin Post because, first of all, we have no bigs, and we need a big who maybe can stretch the floor at all. And now you have a big who can stretch the floor, but then also can make the reads as a passer. And is still extremely switchable on defense, man. Horford is a dog on that side of the ball, and when you talk about the Warriors' ability to switch everything, he's a phenomenal fit there. And I think about the game that he had against the Lakers in the regular season, where for some reason LA's entire game plan was, okay, we are going to continually try to target Horford off of switches with LeBron and Luka. And he held those guys to like 20-something% shooting. I mean, he moves his feet so damn well out in space, and he's so smart. I just love it. I mean, he's a high IQ player. He's experienced. He's versatile on both sides of the ball. I think that is an absolutely money signing on the margin. When you think about the center situation for this team last year, it was the worst in the league. It was actually the worst in the league. Al Horford is a good basketball player and a great fit. And DeAnthony Melton, I'm glad to see him back. Suffered the season-ending torn ACL last year, but he was playing well for the Warriors before that. I mean, it was only 6 games, but I've always liked DeAnthony Melton. And he brings a lot of what this team does need from a bench guard. If you look at his last 2 seasons in Philly, he was actually able to create with at least 70th percentile efficiency out of pick and roll. So there is a dimension of solid ball handling, pull-up shooting, catch and shoot game with him that is an upgrade from what the Warriors have had because, I mean, their bench guard situation was brutal as well. And maybe most importantly, I mean, he's just a really nice defender. He's got like a 6'8" wingspan, really good length at the position, good size, very active, forces steals at a good rate. So he's a great fit at a position where they desperately needed help. And although like ideally it would have been nice for the Warriors to add more of like a true creator, because although Melton is a solid ball handler, I mean, he's not like a very good offensive player. He has some limitations as a passer in terms of his accuracy. And so he's just like kind of fine there. I would have loved to see the Warriors go out there and get a Ty Jerome for cheap or whatever. That was like my hope going into the offseason. It ended up not being possible because they couldn't sign anybody until basically October, thanks to the Kuminga situation. And so considering that, I mean, Melton is a really nice addition. And like, it's easy for me to see them on certain matchups in certain stretches relying on Melton over like Brandon Pajemski. You know, I like Pods. I think Pods is a good player. There are also stretches where Pods is so bad and his shot can be so erratic and he can be incapable of scoring around the basket and his confidence can just leave him being able to turn to a veteran pro who you know can do what you need of him defensively and who offensively could be just a bit more steady. Like, that's really nice. That's something that they didn't have last year. So, again, these aren't, world-ending moves here, but the depth on this team last year was a joke. And getting grown-up, proven, versatile vets who fit here is a big deal. Because the big three is a great foundation. I mentioned 22-5 with all those guys last year. Steph is still a top 5 offensive player in the sport. Dre is still a top 5 defender in the sport. Jimmy is an amazing connective second option on offense. When you look at what he's able to do as an offensive rebounder, as a cutter, operating at times even off the short roll from the nail, just making reads, finishing efficiently. He's so damn good. And he's still a big difference maker on defense with his defensive playmaking, his size, his athleticism, his instincts. I just love that formula of having your great offensive engine, your great defensive anchor, one guy who's really good at complementing them on both sides of the ball. And they already won a playoff series with that formula last year. And now, when you're literally talking about, okay, Quentin Post, your minutes are going to Al Horford. Pat Spencer, your minutes are going to DeAnthony Melton. That's a little bit hyperbolic, but Pat Spencer did actually play some in the playoffs. It just makes a big difference. And it takes a little bit off of a Buddy Hield's plate, who you give him credit for what he did in the playoffs, but he was just overtasked. Now his role should be more reasonable. Moses Moody, right? They're not looking at him and oh man, you could be the one good two-way wing on this roster. And he could just have his inconsistencies there that made him ultimately kind of underwhelming last year. But not being as reliant on those guys is a good thing. And so I do feel like this team is just better than last year. And they finished last year really strong, and they clearly had their limitations. The offense around Steph was embarrassing, but Steph also does so much to elevate an offense. As much as anybody, save a couple guys on the whole planet. And even with these flaws, again, they won a playoff series, and we don't know what would have happened against Minnesota because Steph got hurt, unfortunately.
If you could trade Kuminga for one archetype, what is the most valuable archetype that you think this team needs? Or what kind of player?
That's a really good question, man. That's a really good question. I would say probably still somebody who actually brings some juice as a ball handler, as a creator. That would be what I would look at. Because I think the big situation is good enough now with Horford. Yeah.
Do you like that Malik Monk guy at all? I think that could be a really good gift for you guys.
Yeah, man. That's so awesome. That's so freaking awesome that we turned down Malik Monk. My love, my one and only. No, he would be awesome. He would be absolutely awesome. Because ultimately, if we look at swing factors for this team, they are still so crazy reliant on Steph. And the burden there is just so great that even though I think he's actually going to have an awesome season because of the form that he finished the year in. 27 regular season games with Jimmy. He averaged 27 points per game on 65% true shooting. The guy was playing like a clear top 5 player down the stretch of the season, no doubt about it. He doesn't quite have the on-ball consistency that he did even a couple years ago. And so it's just not going to be as reliably great from him every single night, and having anybody who could take a little bit of that burden off his plate would be so great, because we talk about how they defended him down the stretch in that Rocket series, and it's so ridiculous. They're daring anybody else to make a shot against the zone. They're constantly dedicating multiple bodies to Steph, and he can create wide open shots for his teammates just because he demands that much attention, but they got to make the shots. And so having just another good offensive player here would be really great. And I do still worry about that. I don't think that Horford and Melton fix the problem here. I do think that they help a little bit, though. What do you think about Jimmy, Logan? Because I know that you were optimistic that he was going to elevate in the playoffs. It didn't quite go down that way. What's your outlook for him this season?
I don't think he's the same guy that he was. I think he's a number 2 now. I don't think Jimmy can take on that kind of responsibility. I think he's a number 2 or a number 3. That being said, I think Jimmy's going to have to be more aggressive. Even the passivity that we saw from him in the playoffs. Mm-hmm. Obviously, his role changed, and I think you touched on this a lot last season, that Jimmy was kind of dipping his toes in the water and trying to feel his way around and not impede on Steph and Dre, not trying to overexert himself or do too much. And a lot of that is the reason why Jimmy is so successful, because he can find ways to fit in here. Jimmy's got to strike that balance better, in my opinion, where he needs to feel out games and know, okay, this is a game where I should coast and I should feel it out and I should do all the connective stuff. But he's got to feel the gravity of games and flip that switch. Jimmy, that's the big thing to Jimmy with me is he just has to consistently flip that switch more often. And I don't think he has that kind of gear where he can do that a ton. But he's got to do it more because I didn't like what we saw from him in the playoffs when Steph wasn't available. And like you said, dude, he has to be willing to take some of that burden off of Steph's shoulders. And he does that to an extent, but he has to do it to a higher degree. He has to do it more often and more consistently because that's just going to help Steph out more and help this team out as a whole. But it's not some magical Jimmy's just going to flip the switch. That guy's not there anymore.
Yeah, I think the Warriors can win a playoff series with Jimmy playing at the level that he did last year. I think if they are to win multiple playoff series, they need him to take a step above that. And I'm not expecting that at this point. I want to be clear. I think Jimmy is actually still underrated right now by sort of the NBA consensus, probably just because he is like the amazing complementary second star. I mean, when it comes to doing all of the little things on both sides of the ball, he pretty much gets an A+ across the board. And he's still efficient offensive. I mean, he gets to the line at this ridiculous rate. He's efficient on ball, but he is selective for sure. And he doesn't have that same ability to carry a second unit or really step up and be a 24, 25 point per game scorer alongside Steph. Like, yeah, I mean, he's realistically a really awesome 17, 18 point per game scorer who has this all around impact. But when it comes to his ability to elevate come playoff time, I'm not confident there because even though he was banged up last year, I mean, we just never saw it in the entire regular season, save like a couple games, you know? So I don't think that you can bank on that. I will say, you talk about the old guy factor. I'm optimistic about all these guys being at the same level they were at last year. But when you are talking about relying heavily on three dudes who are in their mid to late 30s, health is such a huge factor here. Because if they lose really any of these three guys, but especially Steph or Jimmy, that is just devastating. They are so much the fulcrums of this team in their respective ways. And I think the depth is upgraded from last year, but there's nobody who comes close to replicating what any one of these guys does on this roster. Like it is unique how reliant they are on these three players and how much everybody is judged by their ability basically to fit in around them and not fuck it up and kind of do basic stuff. But unfortunately, at some point, probably one of these guys is going to get hurt and miss some time. Like if you just look at recent years with Jimmy hasn't played 65 games in a season since 2019. And Steph has been pretty healthy, but even he is probably going to miss 10 to 12 games, and that's going to be a challenge for them. Although Jimmy did do a nice job. If you look at the minutes where he was on the floor without Steph, I mean, the Warriors were still impressively good this past season, but that's something to flag. They are super, super dependent on all of those guys. And then when you look at this team's ability to reach their ceiling, yeah, it comes down to, okay, how crazy consistent can Steph be offensively? How much can Jimmy take the necessary step up? But then also just like, are these role players good enough for the Warriors to actually beat the best of the best? When you look at some of these other teams and they've got difference makers at 4 through 7, 4 through 8, and they've got a bunch of different options they can turn to. And we're talking about the Warriors guys again, and I'm praising them basically for finding dudes who are just solid. Like, is there enough ball handling and shooting on this roster? Does Pods take a step forward? I don't know. I'm not anticipating that at this point. Still, are the Warriors big and athletic enough to contend with some of these really, really top-end teams in the West? When you look at a team that is huge and super physical like the Rockets, a team that is huge in terms of their front court in the Denver Nuggets. I mean, the Thunder, when you just talk about athleticism, it's different, but they're so overwhelming there with all their speed. This is an older team. This is a team that when you look at the role players, athleticism is certainly lacking, and I don't think that adding Al Horford just fixes that. It's great that now they have a playable center. That's awesome. But at the end of the day, that's not the bar when you're talking about going up against like the actual elite teams. So there's just a couple questions here where I'm not convinced enough with their answers to view them as real contenders. But I do think they'll be very good. When we did our top 10 contender stuff early in the summer, before any of this had gone down, I was very close on the Lakers and the Warriors. I had the Lakers one spot higher just because they had more of a legitimate roster in place. And I looked at the Warriors and I was like, there's 3 guys I trust in a playoff series on this roster. Now you've got at least 4 with Al Horford. Between Pods and Melton, they combine to equal 1. That's 5. I'm doing a little math here to say my confidence in this team has increased by them just doing some of this really basic stuff on the margins right, because I truly think the Steph, Jimmy, Dre foundation, fit, talent is that awesome. I mean, the fit is just flat out better than what the Lakers have with the clunkiness
I will
of
say
their big
this.
three and all their defensive questions and concerns.
I completely agree with that. I like the Lakers more as a regular season team. I like the Warriors more as a playoff team.
Why is that? Just because you think that they
Two-way ceiling. The two-way ceiling. Now, the thing that can trump that, if Luka looks like the top 3 player that he is capable of being, I will probably it's determined on that. The Warriors, I would feel more safe picking to win a playoff series right now than I would LA, but if LA's defense looks okay, if Luka gets to that it's more important on Luka, though. That's the biggest thing to me, is if Luka looks like the player that he looked like 2 years ago, I might prefer them. They're close, but I would prefer Golden State right now because of their two-way ability.
It's super close. Clearly, the Lakers' offense is better, but it's pretty easy to see the Warriors being like a top 5 defense, and it's pretty easy to see the Warriors being like the 10th best offense, because Steph still improved this offense by 14 points per 100 possessions last year. Like, his gravity, his offensive impact, it is still absolutely insane. So I do think that they're definitely more balanced. Both of these teams are limited. They are very dependent on a couple of key players, but I just like the fit of the Warriors roster more ultimately. And look, I'm excited. I feel like I've been a real downer about the Warriors this offseason because the Kuminga thing has been such a bummer. And ultimately, there is a ceiling on this team that I wish they could surpass in the Steph era. But when I think about where they were a year ago today, things were more dire. There was no Jimmy Butler. There wasn't even an Al Horford, man. Like, the state of the roster was just worse. And I feel so confident in Steph right now, dude. I don't know. Like, yes, the start to last year's regular season, it was more up and down. It wasn't the prettiest, but he was also an absolute offensive hell. They put him in a reasonable offensive situation, and he was playing out of his mind down the stretch last year. So Steph Curry, for a 37-year-old guard, just absolutely unthinkable how good he still is.